worth hearing again. The Lord be with you.
Also, for you.
Let's pray. O God, you have prepared for those who love you such good things as surpass our understanding. Pour into our hearts such love towards you, that we, loving you in all things and above all things, may obtain your promises, which exceed all that we can desire. Through Jesus Christ our Lord, who lives and reigns with you in the Holy Spirit, one God, forever and ever. Amen.
Amen.
Woody.
Well, thank you, Joshua. This is it's such a delight to welcome our old friend Jay Sidebotham back to St. Columbus this morning. So Joshua, thanks again for the opportunity. Now, a number of us Columbans of a certain age will remember a young, really preternaturally young associate rector named Jay Sidebotham. Left us about over 20 years ago now, I believe. And since then, Jay has been out and leading parishes in New York, North Carolina, Illinois, and Rhode Island. In addition to his parish work, Jay is leading, I think started and leads a ministry called Renewal Works. This is a group that is focusing on helping churches find themselves and where God wants them to be at this time. And Jay, I think you characterized it once as spiritual strategic planning with a focus on the individual members. It sounds really neat. Jay's going to talk to us about that today. You also may follow Jay's weekly reflections called Monday Matters. I know we do. Just to sum it all up, Jay's just simply a remarkable pastor, a really gifted teacher, an extremely whimsical artist and writer. I guess in the terms of my old Methodist sort of thinks of Jay in light of something the great country songwriter Kiki Friedman once said. I'll paraphrase here, and that is they don't make Episcopalians like Jay Sidebotham anymore. So we're really lucky to have you here, Jay. Thanks for being here and welcome back.
Thank you. That may be a blessing, Woody, that they don't make Episcopalians like that much anymore, but it's such a joy and a treat to be with you all at St. Columbus. It holds a special place in my heart. I am, because as Woody suggested, I'm an incurable cartoonist, so I'm going to be sharing screen for a good chunk of this time. What do you think, Joshua? Talk for about 20, 30 minutes and then open it up for questions and comments and rebuttal and perplexity and all that stuff. That'd be great. So by way, let me start sharing, but let me again say just I'm honored to be with you. Let me share a little bit about my history, which is that I started before I went to seminary. Let's see if I can share that. Before I went to seminary, I worked in New York City in something called Schoolhouse Rock, which is animated cartoons that are sort of quasi-educational. The reason they started, and the reason I mention it, is that it started because people realized that many of their children at school were not very interested or not very capable of memorizing multiplication tables, but they were capable of memorizing every word to every rock song that came down the pike. And so in the spirit of Sesame Street, ABC TV decided to put, first of all, multiplication tables to music, and then they did science, and they did grammar, conjunction, junction, and they did civics. I'm Just a Bill, which I regularly send to my congressperson, who apparently has not watched it. But the sermonic point in there, and being a preacher of a certain number of years, everything has a sermonic capability, is that what they did with math was take old truths and make them new. And actually, as we come through COVID, as we come out of COVID, wherever St. Columbus is, I'm mindful because I run around the Episcopal Church like I'm not talking about this spiritual growth stuff. And different churches are in different places in terms of coming out of COVID, and the lessons vary depending on where the church is, the political climate of the church, and its context, how people have understood COVID or not. So there are great varieties. I know a little bit about how St. Columba's has navigated this. I don't entirely know, but what I wanted to do was just share some of the things we've learned about that. I do, if cartoons weren't what you expected, you only have yourselves to blame, because when I came to St. Columba's, I didn't really think that cartooning was going to be part of my work anymore. And then lo and behold, the rather whimsical spirit that was part of the DNA of St. Columba's allowed me to do some cartoons. So this was a cartoon I actually did for folks when we were battling between whether you should go to the 9 o'clock service or the 11:15 service. And it's a depiction of the 9 o'clock service, where there was a variety of things going on, and a maybe more staid frozen chosen Episcopal couple realizes maybe they should navigate their way to the 11:15. And it's at the it was at St. Columba's where we developed the name the Episcoplex. I think St. Columba's was one of the first churches that first Episcopal churches. Other churches have been doing it for a long time, that developed these simultaneous services and had the capacity to do that. Which was just a wonderful way of reaching different groups of people at the same time and building community. So I often look fondly back on St. Columba's as the Episcoplex. So here's the deal. Just by way of introduction, the work I'm doing with Renewal Works is really, as Woody said, to focus spiritual growth within the congregations. It's interesting. I run across people who in Episcopal churches who think, well, we're not about spiritual growth. That's not what we're about at all. And so having that conversation is part of what we do, and to build cultures of discipleship in our congregations. We base that work on a couple principles that have come out of the research, which includes Episcopal churches, but not exclusively. And one of them is that we embed scripture in everything we do. And so I was trying to think of what scripture applies to coming out of COVID. What are the spiritual lessons? And I thought about Exodus, and I thought about exile and coming out of exile and making our way home, and the new thing that God would do with that. But then I realized what week it is. And on Thursday, we observed the Feast of the Ascension Day. So I pulled out of the files a cartoon about Ascension Day, which is really, to me, I don't exactly know the logistics of Ascension Day, like how it happened and what happened to gravity and all that kind of stuff. I do have a sense that, and maybe for me, this is the most important part of the story, is that it caused the disciples to ask, what comes next? Where do we go from here? How do we move forward? What is the new, what's the new normal going to be for this group of people who were just launching the Jesus movement? And it was definitely uncharted. I think we find ourselves in the church as we contemplate coming out of COVID and lessons learned, thinking about that in new ways. So that's kind of what I want to talk about. I'm going to share 4 things that we might think about in terms of lessons learned in this time. My guide and teacher and friend Susan Elliott often used to rib me for excessive alliteration in my writing, and I have refused to give that up. And so there are 4 things that I want to talk about: community, communion, communication, and commitment. So here we go, community. So COVID, I was so surprised. COVID did give opportunity for me to do some cartoons. And shortly after we started COVID, I realized that Episcopalians already had a jump on social distancing. This is a depiction of our 8 o'clock service, which is in a huge, down here in North Carolina, which is in a church that seats 500 or 600 people. And you maybe have 10 people at the 8 o'clock service, and they practice social distancing as they have done for generations. So when we came to social distancing at our church here in Wilmington, it was not a stretch. But how do we think about community in this time? So the challenges are a few. The isolation that came with the experience, pastoral challenges. How do we, as Walter Brueggemann says, how do we attend to the longings and losses that have been so palpable in this season? Coincidentally, tragically, the economic and racial divides have been highlighted in this time. And I know churches are thinking about how to engage children in this time, particularly, which has been a challenge. Kurt Vonnegut was once asked by a presidential candidate what issue should he focus on. And Kurt Vonnegut said loneliness. He said, if you can address loneliness in American culture, you'll win by a landslide. And I think that, I don't know how you all feel, I think that for many people, the experience of isolation and loneliness in COVID has just been one of the greatest challenges. At the same time, one of the things I've observed about churches, again, I should know more about what's been going on at St. Columba's, but for years I've been like this big fan of the daily office and thought that every church should do the daily office, and really pushed it. And I used to get sort of annoyed when nobody would show up, and often we'd do the daily office with 2 or 3 people, and I just say, what is wrong with these people? Don't they really love Jesus or something? I mean, you know, just getting my totally clergy judgmental hat on. What we have found in churches that I've worked with, but also I've just heard about this as I've talked, is that the daily office has just grown exponentially in COVID, thanks to our friend Zoom. And that it's not that people didn't want to experience the community that comes with saying daily prayers, it's that they didn't want to drag themselves to a church building. And so one of the things we're finding as a lesson is that in coming out of COVID, I hear this again and again in churches, they will figure out a way to continue these spiritual practices, both in a hybrid mode within the church and also to allow people to experience them at home. Another piece, which I think would be particularly pertinent for St. Columba's with its ongoing vocation to engage Christians of all ages, especially children, is that it's been hard to keep children engaged in this season at home. Season, you know, by Zoom, by Sunday school class, by Zoom, or however you all handled it. I don't know. You know, churches have tried this. It hasn't been hugely successful, actually. But what has been hugely successful is to think about how families can practice formation at home with their children, which is probably where it should have been happening all along. So there's a lot of lessons that come in this time that have to teach us about maybe things that we hadn't thought about doing before that might actually help us go deeper in our spiritual life. So those are some thoughts about community. Communion, this is a cartoon that was prompted by the thought of drive-through communion. If another person asks me for fries with that, I am done. And I think one of the pieces that's been a real challenge for Episcopalians in this time is to think about how we can celebrate, particularly celebrate the Eucharist when we can't get together, and the sense of missing being together. I don't know how you all experience. I'd love to hear when I shut up. I'd love to hear from you how you've all experienced that. But it is sort of putting people in touch with the power of sacred space, and also the elements of sacramental life that are that we see and sense and touch and feel, the bread and wine in open hand, the water of baptism. Again, one of the most powerful experience I had at St. Columba's, and I don't know what shape it's taking right now, was the healing rite and the laying on of hands. And all of that has shifted in COVID, but how do we think about coming back to that? The opportunity I see is that, again and again, I hear this, people realize I had no idea how much I cared about the Eucharist. I had no idea how much I cared about being together in the church with other people. I think it gives us an opportunity not only to teach about the Eucharist, but to think about what it will mean for us to come together. At the same time, one of the things that I've heard again and again, a great lesson, is that people realize that the church is more than the building. Building is important, coming together is important, the beauty of the space, worshiping the Lord in the beauty of holiness is important. But there's also, and we try to stress this in Renewal Works, this individual responsibility for us to think about our own spiritual development is just critical. So thoughts on communion, thoughts on communication. And this is some poor hapless priest who's technologically challenged. I'm not going to name any names, but you might be looking at him trying to figure out how it is that we can continue worship, priests carving out sacred space at home in order to record the liturgy for Sunday. One of the lessons is that resource congregations seem to have a jump on the technology, and that there really is a disparity between our congregations and the resources. I've just had this great privilege of working at places like St. Columba's, like St. Bart's, like Church of the Holy Spirit, that were blessed with resources. There are so many churches that 25 people on a Sunday, one clergy person trying to hold it together. Not capable, just not in their wheelhouse to put on these, beautiful stream services. And I think that says something about the body of Christ and how our congregations have a responsibility for each other, and to explore the possibility of shared resources, to learn how we move into more hybrid worship, to think about new roles and staff that need to be envisioned, and to think about how we run our meetings in a better and more efficient way, and what has to be an in-person meeting with a carbon footprint and what doesn't. The other piece that I've just noticed, and this is the part that I want to say, I hope you all are really nice to your clergy at St. Columba's, and that you're treating them well, and realizing that this has been, for all caregivers of all sort, this has just been a hugely stressful time. I know one church where the wardens would, on a regular basis, ask their pastor, it wasn't an Episcopal church, they would ask their pastor, is it well with your soul? And I just think that that is the stress on clergy. I read a Barna research report yesterday that said during COVID, 29% of Protestant pastors had thought about quitting. That this has just been like a hugely challenging time for clergy in particular, and church staff. And so how in this time those people can be supported is one of the challenges. And then one more alliterative title, if Susan Elliott will allow me, commitment. So this is, I have a friend out west, he's got a great church in Seattle called Church of the Epiphany. If you're ever there, you got to go, because it's just an awesome church. And he says that his church is like a spiritual gym. And that he encourages people, for instance, to show up regularly. This is a cartoon I did for Church Pension Group, which shows a rather rotund, out of shape person with a big old bag of Doritos saying that he'd like to get in spiritual shape, but he's only going to show up once every 6 weeks. I do think that out of this time, the challenge is people have gotten a taste of not going to church, not physically going. Discovering how easy it is to stay home with the New York Times and a cup of coffee. And we've also seen challenges with giving. Those need to be addressed head on as we come out of COVID. And I do think that my sense is, you can tell me I'm wrong, my sense is that as we come out of COVID, those who come back are going to come with deeper commitment. And that this whole experience of COVID and the coincident crises of racial divide and political rancor and economic challenge, not to mention climate crisis, all of these things converging over the last year have the potential to call us to recognize our dependence on God for help through this time. And to me, that's one of the great opportunities that comes with this. One more cartoon, and then I just open it up for comments and any reflections that people have. Is that good timing, Joshua? Perfect. Okay. So this is a cartoon that I did for the church, but actually corporations have picked it up, and it's basically saying we've never done it that way, or the corollary, we've always done it this way. It's pretty clear to me that the church coming out of this, the new normal is not going to be the old normal. We're not going back to some model either from 18 months ago, or particularly the nostalgia of the church of the 50s or 60s. We're going to have to find a new way of being church. It will incorporate what we've learned through Zoom and other technologies. It will incorporate our understanding that's come to us over the past year of the racial divides and how economic disparity is a challenge to our culture and particularly to our church. It's interesting to me. I don't think it's entirely coincidental. Our church, I'm serving actually halftime. I don't know if I mentioned this or whatever. I'm serving halftime now at St. James Church in New York City, Madison Avenue. So I spend 2 weeks in North Carolina and 2 weeks in New York City, which is fun and kind of crazy. But we just finished in our church in New York City. We just finished the Sacred Ground program, which is really a quite fine program put out by the Episcopal Church Center. And it's just been interesting to see how in COVID, the eagerness to reflect on that particular element of brokenness in our history and in our society and our church has surfaced. So I just I think it's interesting and not entirely accidental that the church has been forced to have these conversations about how we navigate this health crisis and the need for healing in that particular way. And I know St. Columba's has a special vocation to healing, but how we handle our outreach. I was impressed that what I gathered is that for all of the pieces that have been done at St. Columba's and have had to pull back into remote connection, it seems like, and you can tell me I'm wrong and maybe you can witness to this, it seems like the outreach ministries have taken on new form and have been particularly powerful in this time. I'd be interested in hearing about that, but I think that's an opportunity for us as a church to think about how we move forward. So the lessons involve community, communion, communication, and commitment. With apologies to Susan Elliott, I will shut up now and take any comments or questions or thoughts that you all have. I'd love to hear what you are learning in this time.
Thank you so much, Jay. That was really great. Well, one question that I've been thinking a lot about is, you mentioned how some congregations, parishes have more resources than others for kind of digital capacity, and ours being one that does. And as we kind of move back into more hybrid, we've been mostly just online with very few in-person things, as our house churches being one of the in-person. But as we go forward and we think about what's our goal for digital ministry, it would be so easy for the digital online ministry to become like television and more of just entertainment, and not wanting it to be that, but what is the goal? Is it to get people eventually to come back? Is it for them to stay there and be participating from afar? What's your sense about that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it heightens the digital experience of church, particularly worship, heightens what is one of the great challenges that I think we face, particularly in the American church, which is church as consumer product, church as performance. I'm guided. I've been very taken by, I probably said it the last time I was there because I always have a few things to say, really, but I was very taken, and as a rector, my attitude was changed by Soren Kierkegaard's metaphor for worship, which is that he said in the liturgy, the worship is a drama. The clergy and the musicians and others are the prompters. The congregation are the actors, and God is the audience, which really shifts a lot of the way I thought about my role as a leader in liturgy, because I always thought, okay, if I get good comments at the door, then I did a good job. I pleased the congregation. Or as rector, if the music was excellent, or there were no typos in the bulletin, or if it was perfect, then I did a good job. What I think we need to establish, and this will be challenging in the digital world, is how to say, when you come to worship, you're the actor. You are part of this drama. It's not just for you to take in and then write a snarky email if you don't like it. It's really about saying, I am bringing my best offering to God, my oblation. And that becomes particularly challenging in streaming. So I think that would be something to just watch. I do think, and I've seen it just in a variety of settings here in sort of coastal North Carolina and in New York City, in urban settings, and in places that where the church is rural. The digital aspect does help people connect. And there are just a ton of people in our church that is demographically senior who can be reached in this way. Now that we've all had our crash courses in Zoom and figured out where the mute button is and all that stuff, I do think that there's great possibility for building community that wasn't there before. I don't know if this pandemic had happened 15 years ago, what we would have done about staying connected. I really wonder. I see a picture from Kristen Moore. Have you seen examples of church cooperating across the digital divide? For example, churches were great. What I've seen, I don't know how much they have shared. What I have seen and heard about, which I think is an interesting thing, is people sort of participating in their own church in whatever way that's possible, and then sampling other churches later in the day, like the National Cathedral. I mean, I just know so many people who go to their own church and then stream the National Cathedral service, or other churches that are more resourced. As a healing right minister, any ideas about how we might get back to it going forward? There's just something so powerful about laying on of hands. I just, until that can happen, I think we'll be missing something. The church where I work at St. James in New York had a very powerful hands-on ministry. And what they've done in COVID is say, if you have a prayer for healing, they have an email and a phone number you can call, and one of the healing ministers will call that person on Sunday evening and just say a prayer over the phone. So it maintains that kind of confidential aspect that's just so important in the healing ministry. That every church I've gone since St. Columba, I've established a healing ministry, and it's just because it was so beautiful. I remember one Sunday, I didn't know a thing about the healing ministry when I came. They didn't teach me about it in seminary. And I came and somebody didn't show up, one of the healing ministers, and said, Bill Tully said to me, "Kid, you're on." And it just like threw me in, right? And it was one of the most powerful experiences I've ever had in my life as a priest, just the people who I thought, because I was wet behind the ears, and I always thought, this crowd in Washington, D.C. had everything together. And I didn't know what kind of needs for healing they could possibly bring to that place, because they seemed to have life, by the horns. And it was so beautiful and powerful to me to know that everybody, you talk to somebody for 5 minutes and everybody has a brokenness of body, mind, or spirit, relationship, or memory somewhere deep in there. And that lesson has stayed with me.
There's a couple of comments in here.
Yeah.
From Tom Bowder about how, the church has always talked about doing more for the homebound, but St. Columba's actually, we did a phone tree where people got calls. Is someone on who could talk more about what the phone tree has been like and how it's been received? I get reports on this, but I'm not actually a part of it. Yeah, Susan, please. Let's see here. You should be able to unmute yourselves. Whoops. You know what? I took that away. Sorry. Try again, Susan. There you go.
Okay. I'm not super active in the phone tree ministry, but I was active in it from the start. Someone called me to be in touch, and I said, well, we're okay. And this is the experience people had. I said, we're okay, but I'd be glad to participate in this. And I received 4 people to speak with, and one of them didn't need any contact. They felt like they were okay, he and his wife, and busy and all that. And one person was very difficult to get in touch with, and turned out to be quite ill. And I spoke to this person once, and she died. So I mean, it's been heartbreaking in some ways. And someone else I spoke to for several months, and that person also died. And the person that I've continued to be in touch with is just wonderful, and actually knows Jay and talks about Jay from way back. So Jay, it's a good kind of contact that I have. Not quite weekly, we're not all perfect, but close to weekly, every other week maybe. Anyhow, she's great, and I've loved this opportunity to know her. And she talks about stuff that she might not talk with other people, I think. So it's good. Yeah.
Wow.
And I will say, just as I run around the church and hear about what's going on in places, that has been a response in many congregations to do that kind of work, being in touch, vestries, splitting up the list and calling everybody or whatever, just to check in, which I think, we do here in North Carolina. We do that during hurricanes, but that's about the only time we do it. It's like, are everybody okay? You got milk? But I do think that thinking about that kind of community, that connectivity, there's another C word, that's an opportunity for churches moving forward to see how powerful that is for folks. The loneliness thing is huge, and what's tragic is I will often hear people say, one of the loneliest moments I can remember is going to coffee hour at some church or something, now, just I think sometimes our churches aren't as helpful in addressing that as I think Jesus would want us to be.
Another way we've responded to this, Jay, is the last 3 forums, we did a co-host of adult forums with a church in Little Rock, Arkansas.
Oh, nice.
We had a priest there speak on environment and faith. And that's something that if we could rewind the clock a year, I would have been much more intentional about forming partnerships for adult forums, because we could all meet in the same space. Of course, when we move forward, it will be this a little bit of a different scenario if we're having adult forums in the nave, as was the practiced before COVID, it becomes a little bit more tricky on how to have a joint space like that. But
Yeah. Yeah. I think, and to Woody's point about spiritual strategic planning, I think, every church, particularly one with the complexity of St. Columba's, is going to have to figure that out. What will the options be for folks, and can folks be present if they're not in the room? I do think it's a new normal. We're gonna have to make it up. With the guidance of the Holy Spirit, I pray.
And Terry and Dick said the Stephen Ministry is still active at St. Columba's and is available to be present to people, even as we're kind of separated with social distancing.
So Terry and Dick, physically present or what? How are you doing that? How does that work?
Mostly by phone.
Yeah.
People who go for walks with masks with others. But
right.
We're distanced all over, as you know, the metropolitan Washington area. So phone or Zoom is better.
Yeah. So Kristen's asking, beyond daily bread, you mean the daily office? What other online ideas have you seen that seem likely to continue?
Yeah, so Jay, something we've done, and this started early on, is since there was just like no real chance to connect, we've did a 2 or 3 minute
nice
kind of spiritual nourishment that we post on YouTube and other places, which turned out to be we've had lots of people from the parish offer them. We've had Jay, you did one. What you sent in?
Yeah, that thing I sent you. Yeah, okay.
We use as a daily bread. Yeah, I would love to hear from this group too. What has meant a lot to you in some of our online ministry? What would you like to see more of? Yeah, we continue to think a lot about this. And Jay, from your experience, have you seen kind of innovative things that churches have done besides kind of live streaming services that you've thought, we would never have seen this if it wasn't for COVID, but it's like a great ministry?
Yeah, well, I mentioned the daily office, which I've just been stunned at how many people, and particularly in the communities, a couple communities I know, surprised by who shows up. Like, I don't know, sometimes we clergy, we sort of peg people and figure out, okay, they wouldn't be interested in that, but they might, So I think entering into that, the resources in the prayer book, which we have already, and then adapting them to online possibilities is a rich area to explore. I mean, a lot of what I've seen in churches has actually preceded COVID, again, from fairly resource places. Christ Church Charlotte does just an amazing job of sending out, and they just send out every day, they send out a Bible verse and like maybe just a one-liner question or something to think about it, but that kind of daily connection. The other thing that's been interesting to me, I don't know if you've had the experience, but Bible study and such classes, book study on Zoom, I have found it's a different experience of sharing than sitting around a circle in a living room or something. But I have actually found that it can sometimes promote an openness and a vulnerability that surprises me. That something about the Zoom technology and being in your own home, and maybe like you're in your pajamas and you got a cup of Java or whatever, and you're just like chill. and you can just say what's on your heart in ways that, you know, driving to church and showing up and putting on your church face and sitting in a living room and all that kind of stuff just doesn't quite happen in the same way. So I you know, I don't think Zoom is the answer for everything, thank God, but I do think it provides some community capacity that has been surprising to me. So.
Magali mentions that another thing that we've done, and thanks for reminding me of this, Magali, is we did a Maundy, Thursday, and a Good Friday service during Holy Week, which was a Zoom. So it wasn't live streamed in the sense that everybody was sharing the same perspective. It was like this, where everybody could see each other.
Right.
And we did the service through Zoom. And I've heard from several people, and this kind of reflects, Jay, what you just said about the kind of power of Zoom, is that having church in our homes or Bible study in our homes really does give the service and the sharing of scripture a different accent and powerful one.
I think that's right. And I do think that particularly, I just will reiterate that thing that we've noticed about formation for children taking place within the context of the home and providing resources for families to do stuff together, as opposed to, again, this consumer model of thinking you're going to bring your kid to an hour on Sunday morning and they're going to get religion. But to just say this really needs to be woven into the fabric of our family, like they say in the Old Testament, you know, like put the law on your door frame and then put it when you walk and talk with your children, talk about it. You know, it's just like those beautiful passages from Deuteronomy that just say this is meant to be, you're supposed to live and breathe this stuff. And how do parents do that with their young people? Is just a piece of that. So.
Yeah, that's so interesting, Jay, because I think I would have naturally thought that the kind of online aspect is more consumeristic, whereas the in-person, it kind of militates against it. But I really, yeah, I like that twist, and that makes a lot of sense to me. Let's see here. Kathy says, a group of us still meet as an anchor group. Instead of meeting every other week, we now meet weekly on Zoom for 40 minutes. It's a check-in to share our thoughts and a time to pray. I know of other St. Columba groups that continue to meet by phone or Zoom. The connection has been really meaningful.
That's great. Hi, Kathy. That's great. Yeah, it's it is does seem to be a powerful connection that people have. So just, you know, I don't know what Washington, D.C. is like in terms of what the plans are and what the diocese has said and all that stuff. Are you looking towards in-person worship anytime soon, or what's the deal?
Yeah, great question, Jay. You know, so the nave is recently began a renovation to fix some of the water damage and stop the water from getting in, which meant doing the roof, which prevented us from meeting both inside and outside for a period of time. But I think the roof is completed, and so we are on the cusp of having regular in-person worship outside in the courtyard. I think is the most immediate plan, and we're announcing that when that will start real soon.
Got it. Yeah, it's funny. I was I was talking to a friend because you know we're spending a lot of time conversing about sort of what's next with Renewal Works, and I was talking to a friend, and he's in Florida, and he said, "Well, we've had in-person worship since last August." So I said, "Well, that's, you know, maybe that says something about Florida." But anyway, but it's just, I think there are different experiences going on all over all over the wider church. So.
Somebody also mentioned that we've had some workshops on forgiveness and prayer and meditation that I've led. I know David Griswold, who I think is out there somewhere too, has also led classes and workshops.
Nice.
And yeah, Sharon says that she also belongs to an anchor group. Such fabulous support. Yeah.
The anchor group started under Jim Donald, right? Is that right? Jennifer is nodding her head, so I think it's the source of all St. Columba wisdom. Yes. And I just, that's those small groups I just think are critical to sort of building the life of a community. So.
We have time for one or two more questions. And then Jay, would you mind closing us in prayer at the end of this?
I'd be honored. I'd be honored.
Great. Yeah, Sharon says that we've been together since 1996.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah. Alice would like to hear an update on your family, Jay.
Oh my, okay, I will if Alice will tell me about her boys. Who were some of the funniest teenagers I ever met in my entire life. But anyway, that's another topic. Yeah, so Francis we are down at our house in Wrightsville Beach, and Francis is downstairs with our soon-to-be 2-year-old grandson. And we are expecting, he will have a sister in about a month or two. So he is, you may remember him running around the church, John Reed, who is older than he was at St. Columba's, and he and his wife live in Raleigh. My daughter Helen is married, and she lives sort of in New York City, except last March they came to stay with us. They thought they were coming for 2 weeks to stay with us until this COVID thing passed. They stayed with us until December, and then they got sick of us, and so they went out to Colorado where they could work remotely in their New York jobs and then ski every weekend. And so that's about over. So they're going to come back to us in the beach, and then they're going to go back to New York and look for an apartment. So everybody's healthy and seemingly happy, and yeah, they're doing great. Francis has started work doing, I was mentioning this earlier before everybody got on. Francis has started it's a business / ministry / service doing interventions for substance abuse, for drug and alcohol and weight issues. And that's been her vocation for the last 2 or 3 years. And it's great work. It's important work. It's hard work. And there's a lot of work, unfortunately, that in our culture, too much work. So that's one of the things that she's doing. But this weekend we are grandparents, so that's what we're up to. And I'm working, as I say, half-time at Renew Works and half-time at St. James in New York, and then enjoying doing a bunch of cartoons all the time because the church never ceases to supply material. And I'm working on the next year's church pension group calendar. And if you have any ideas of church cartoons, send them my way, because I don't make anything up. I just keep my eyes open.
Chris Moore mentioned that yesterday the environmental committee got together again for another cleanup in Ward 8, collected 50 old tires from the woods. Oh, way to go, Chris.
It's awesome. It's awesome.
Well, Jay, that was incredibly stimulating, and both the staff and the vestry and so many members of the different committees are really in the weeds right now, thinking through the coming year post all of this as we incorporate the lessons we've learned. So thank you so much for really stirring the pot for us.
An honor to be with you. Closing prayer.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Let us pray. Gracious God, you give us many gifts, and we thank you for the gift of this way to be together in times when we are led to be apart from each other. We pray for St. Columba's, giving thanks for its ministry of faithfulness and joy over the years. I give thanks for what it has meant to me as a community and to so many others. And I pray that St. Columba's will be guided by your Holy Spirit in the days ahead as we move through all of these challenges, and may in your grace they be seen as opportunities. All this we ask not in our own strength, but praying in the power of the Holy Spirit and gathering in the name of Jesus. Amen. Really fun to be with you. I want to stop at every frame and find out what's going on with all of you, but that probably can't happen. Anyway, nice to be with you. Hey, Lindsay, thank you too.
Thank you, Jay.
See you, Tom.
Thank you, Jay.
Let's go to Honduras, man.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you,
again,
Jay.
everyone. Have a wonderful week. Happy Mother's Day. We'll see you all next week. Same
God-
great time, same great hour.
God bless.